Hello TikTok, Juliana here, getting ready to tell part 2 of my story. Let's see, where I left off was I met my husband, my first husband, in 1996, at the end of 96, and we got married 3 months later in January of 1997. I believe I looked back and I asked myself, like, why did you get married so quickly? And why did you get married with the first guy that asked you to get married? And I believe I did that because after I had gotten raped and lost my scholarship, I was living house to house. I didn't have really a stable place to stay. I stayed at a friend's house. I stayed in my car. I stayed at hotels. I remember I would go into the hospitals and I would go up to the ICU room or surgical room, waiting rooms, and I would sleep there. I would go wash up in the restroom, do your little bird bath type thing, and then go to school. I did not leave on good terms at my parents' house. They ended up taking my car that they had bought me for my graduation, and they sold it to my aunt. They tried selling it to a lot of people, and they were like, no, that's Juliana's car for her graduation. She kept up her end of the bargain. I never got below a 3.75 GPA on a 4.0 scale. The only one that wouldn't do that was my aunt. One of my aunts. My dad has 8 brothers and sisters total, with him included. So one of my aunts ended up buying the vehicle from my dad. So I was left with no vehicle. I ended up having to buy, odd and end vehicles like a Datsun 280ZX. I had one of those. It was a standard vehicle. It was pretty cool. Anyways, I was living on the streets until one day seeing one of my other aunt, my Aunt Rosalie. My Aunt Rosalie took me in. I started living with her and my cousin. I loved it there. I was working at American Furniture. I was also going to school. I started taking classes to become an emergency medical technician. I ended up trying to do that, but my first call was an abuse of a baby. The mother was putting her cigarettes out on the baby's back, and the baby had an iron burn mark on the legs. I couldn't stand it. I could not stand it. I wanted to beat up everybody that was hurting children, and there's a lot of calls here in New Mexico for children that are hurting. So I stopped doing that. So then I ended up getting my pharmaceutical license. I started working in a hospital at Presbyterian in the inpatient pharmacy. While I was doing that, I was going back to college to get my pharmaceutical degree to be a pharmacist. That's a 6-year program. I know I could have done that really quickly. It's very high in math and the medical field. I started to do that, and I was working at Presbyterian. I met my husband while I was at my Aunt Rosalie's house, through my little cousin Angelina. She had a little boyfriend who knew a 23-year-old. I was 18 at that time. A 23-year-old that would stay at his house, whatever. So we end up getting hooked up by these young kids. After that, I ended up leaving my aunt's house because we were all partying at my aunt's house, and my uncle, who is my dad's brother, we were all drinking, watching Set It Off, I remember. and my Uncle Richard tried to kiss on me. And I was furious. I kicked him off. I started talking shit to him. My Aunt Rosalie kicked me out instead of my uncle, saying, not to be throwing rocks in glass houses. Whatever, at that time, I didn't understand what that meant. So I was with my husband at that time, and so we left. We ended up sleeping on the streets again, or in my car. We would stay in hospitals. We would go up to the ICU rooms, waiting rooms, and sleep there. Then I ended up getting a job working in the mortgage business. I worked that for 5 years. Me and my husband got married after 3 months of being with each other. We loved to drink. We loved to party. We would do all kinds of drugs. We tried everything. We tried acid. We tried Winnie the Pooh's, Dancing Skeletons. We tried PCP. Back then they called them super cools. We did cocaine. We did marijuana. I mean, we did it. We lived the life. Along with all of that came physical abuse. My husband was very, I don't know how to describe him. Like, he was just abusive. We would fight, we would throw blows everywhere. We didn't care. He was a very jealous person. I'm an outgoing person, so I talk to everybody. I've always been that type of person. I know one of my cousins that we used to hang out with, she did not like him. A lot of the family didn't like him. He wouldn't work. He wouldn't help pay any bills. I'm the one that worked, got us an apartment. During the whole time of partying, I got pregnant several times. It was really hard for us to get pregnant because of my PCOS. So we had to do fertility treatments. We did the Clomid thing. We did the shots. I would get pregnant, but then I would end up losing the baby because he would beat me. I ended up losing 5 children before we actually ended up having our son Ethan. We got pregnant with him in February in 2005, and we ended up having him February 24, 2006. I said that once I had a kid, I will not put up with anybody abusing my son. Okay, so I was with my husband at that time, and I was getting ready to stand in my little cousin's wedding. I wasn't going to stand with my husband because they didn't like him, and I was going to stand with a different guy. Okay, he didn't like that. He called me a whore, a bitch, and it's just standing in a wedding. I had no understanding of it. He got in my son's face. We were on my way to my grandma's and to go do her hair. I would do that on a daily. She would call me. She'd be like, Mia, come in. Will you come do a permanent in my hair? And I'll feed you enchiladas. I loved her enchiladas. We're on our way to Rio Rancho from one of our apartments, and he starts yelling in my son's face because we're arguing about me standing in my cousin Jennifer's wedding. And he said, your mom's a bitch, yelling in my son's face. And I pulled over and I threw him out. And I told him, you will never put my son, talk to him like that again. You will never be in his face. You will never show him any kind of abuse. And I filed for divorce. That was the first divorce from him. Stay tuned for part 3.